That was the content of the letter delivered to the kingdom. To the nobles, it was a preposterous and infuriating statement. They felt it deserved a curt response. Don't butt in and spout this irresponsible nonsense. But of course, some of them grasped the real meaning within the message. They understood well enough. The slain theocracy's statement implied their diplomatic position: we have no intention of antagonizing Aints Ul Gaun. That meant one of the three most powerful countries in the region was concerned about taking on a single caster. Well, that made sense. Gazef continued his line of thought. A squad from the 6 scriptures was handily wiped out. He wasn't saying Aints Ul Gaun did it on his own, but the slain theocracy probably didn't want to make an enemy of someone who wielded that much power. If this conflict really was entirely the Empire's ploy and Aints Ul Gaun only happened to be involved, he didn't think the theocracy would make such a statement. HMPH. What can one caster do anyway? We number 250,000. Count Lytton cracked a derisive smile and laughed at Gazef's caution. Gazef kept himself from furrowing his brow. That caster was immensely powerful. The role he could play was astoundingly major, but at the same time he understood what Count Lytton was saying. If he didn't know better, he would have thought the same thing. For example, the Empire had Fluda Paradine, a great caster whose name was known far and wide. He was said to be able to use 5th or perhaps even 6th tier magic, but no one knew the details. That was because Fluda had never participated in battle against the kingdom, so his magic had never wreaked havoc on their army. Furthermore, though everyone knew 6th tier was awesome, it was simply reality that they didn't grasp exactly what that meant. That was true even for the captain of the Royal Select, who had been through a great many battles. To someone who wasn't a caster, but a noble who knew of magic only academically, it must have been even harder to fathom. In fact, many kingdom nobles didn't think Fluda was a big deal. They thought the Empire hyped him up for appearances. This opinion was especially prevalent among higher-ranking nobles who didn't have much contact with adventurers or other occupations that used magic. Count Lytton must have been one of those nobles. He clearly considered casters a type of commonplace magician. Of course, the priests he called when he was sick or injured was somehow different. I don't think we should feel safe just because of our numbers. If this caster used a flying spell and an area of effect attack, we would be in deep trouble. It would also be a problem to be hit with long-range attack spells, but I doubt the Empire would waste a specialist like that. It is treating him strangely, though. I don't think it would go to these lengths if he was a mere caster. We should be wary, Margrave Uravana murmured solemnly. His hair was already completely white, and his face was covered in wrinkles, but it still definitely held the particular dignity of a person with many years of experience. His age was part of the reason, but each word he said carried a weight that Count Lytton had not. Even Lytton himself had to nod in agreement, albeit reluctantly, but Marquis Bolarope had a rebuttal. HMPH, who is Aints Ul Gaun anyway? Like Lytton said, what can he do on his own? If he comes flying through the sky, shoot him down with arrows. If he attacks at range, we'll do the same. What can one measly caster do? Casters only change the course of an entire battle in stories. With all due respect, some of the bard's heroic sagas are true apparently. You haven't heard, Captain, but flashy stories get people's attention. When bards are busy exaggerating, sooner or later, the story becomes something that is far from the truth. And stories are apt to change in major ways when passed from teller to teller besides. But if we prepared with a unit of casters who can cast Fireball, is it possible to round up a big group of people who can use Fireball, Captain? I doubt it. Fireball was a Tier 3 spell. Even the Empire, with its Magic Academy, would probably have difficulty gathering a large number of casters who could use that. Then isn't that your answer? Magic is just one weapon. No matter how powerful he is, this caster won't be able to change the course of the battle on his own. You're a good example yourself, Captain Stronov. No one can defeat you in a duel, but you also can make short work of an army tens of thousands strong. Marquis Bolarope was saying something true. Gazef couldn't find anything to argue against. Moreover, Gazef had heard doubtful tales of 10,000 soldiers getting killed with a single spell only in stories. Even the old woman Ligrit Bell's Korau, one of the 13 heroes, didn't have that much power. But Gazef was still worried. Is he just speaking from ignorance if he doesn't actually know any amazing casters? What about dragons? Marquis Blumrush, is the caster a human, I presume? Why do you bring up dragons? Oh, I was just thinking, since one of them could take an entire human army, there's no point in bringing up dragons when we're talking about humans. Your premise is wrong in the first place. What are you thinking? Being very frightened of a single caster, Marquis Bolarope glared at Gazef. Shouldn't you be ashamed, as a noble of the kingdom? Though I do understand your worries, Captain, we should probably assume this Ain't Ul Gaun's individual fighting power is equal to 5,000 men. F5,000? Count Litton's eyes grew large. 5,000 in one, isn't that a bit of an overestimation? Surely half that amount is fine. I am assuming the captain is equal to 1,000 men. If the captain is on guard against this enemy, 5 times that amount makes sense because I trust the captain SI. Thank you. I wonder if Ain't Ul Gaun's combat ability is really equal to only 5,000, but assessing it as anything higher seems unlikely. It is better to thank the man and keep him happy. With those thoughts, Gazef bowed to Bolarope. Can I say something? Prince Barbaro, who had been silent up until now, spoke. There is something that has been on my mind for a while. Couldn't we send adventurers to war? They were working in the kingdom, so it should be a simple matter of drafting them as royal subjects. Why are we still not allowed to pull them into battle? There isn't any law against it. The great nobles exchanged looks. As overseers of their domains, they knew how valuable adventurers were. That's why they didn't think in the way Barbaro did. Gazef felt that the king was at fault for this remark. If he had given Barbaro a domain and had him run it, this question would never have come up. Marquis Revan cleared his throat. Prince, first, do you understand that adventurers are stronger than soldiers? Yes, I know that. That's why they would be able to do such wonderful things for us if we drafted them. The Empire's knights would probably be a piece of cake for them. Without a doubt, I am sure. But if we did that, then our enemy, the Empire, this time would draft adventurers to fight back. When that happens, we wouldn't see adventurers clashing with adventurers. We would see adventurers killing the weaker soldiers. If that happens, losses on both sides will increase. Many more of the weaker people will die. So we've decided we want to borrow the adventurer's power. This avoids military escalation. It is also forbidden in the Adventurers Guild rules. For the same reason, they couldn't hire workers either. In their cases, workers were also more expensive than adventurers. And workers were also considered untrustworthy. I don't like it, but I understand. Then what if the city gets attacked? If they still didn't help us, that would be unforgivable as people of our country know. I understand what you're saying, Your Highness, but it is hard to tell whether they consider themselves subjects of the kingdom or not. Many of them live as travelers. More than anything, if an adventurer dies in battle, that is a loss for the country. And the greater the adventurer, the greater the loss. Specifically, those losses would increase the possibility that monsters appear. We don't have enough adventurers to deal with them. Hence, there is a separation between the military and adventurers. Earlier, Marquis Revan said he enlisted retired adventurers as soldiers, didn't he? They were former Orichalcum ranks or something like that. Is that fine? Apparently, it is not an issue. The Adventurers Guild has rules, but they don't apply to people who have left the guild. That is why he was able to hire them. I don't know, I just don't like this. Some of the nobles chuckled in agreement, but that applies to Orichalcum rank. It might be different for Adamantite rank. Currently in the kingdom, we have 2 Adamantite ranked teams, but there was no one present who hadn't heard of the Blue Roses. They took action during the demon disturbance. Before their era in the spotlight, there was another Adamantite team. They retired, but they don't appear to have been hired by anyone. Right, Captain? That is right. There were 4 members. One runs a training hall to train select students in swordsmanship. 2 went off traveling together. The last one was an old woman. She once belonged to the Blue Roses, but later disappeared. Gazef recalled each memorable character, counting them on his fingers. He had been walking in the royal capital when his master, who had seen his fight in the royal tournament, dragged him to the training hall. There, he endured a hell of force study and sword technique drills. Because of that training, Gazef, who had been a simple mercenary, was able to better serve the king. But that said, no, thinking back on it now, those are good memories. I see. I heard there is an adventurer team in the city called Raven Black. I thought perhaps their caster, beautiful Princess Nabe, could face Ain't Ul Gaun, but I suppose it won't work out. The idea itself was a good one, but the Adventurers Guild was sure to oppose it. Several nobles began to disparage the guild. They said they raid nothing but commoners. Who do you think is hiring adventurers in the first place? If you raid a loyal subject of the kingdom, it is only natural to cooperate. And so on. To those at the top, anyone who didn't bow to authority was unpleasant. But it was also true that without adventurers, fighting off monsters would be practically impossible. If the Adventurers Guild moved away, the kingdom would slowly fall into ruin, unable to exterminate the larger monsters that appeared. That was surely what would happen, even with Gazef around. Monsters had a wide range of special abilities. These abilities required a wide range of attacks, defenses, and healing to exterminate them. That was why adventurers were indispensable. Of course, it would have been a different story if, like in the Empire, they had casters and rangers incorporated into their army. No, that is brilliant, Your Highness. Doesn't he sound bad at all? It was some baron who had shouted. His status was definitely not high enough to be in the room. So his presence meant he had to be someone's flunky. Beautiful Princess Nabe may have an insightful opinion as a caster. At the very least, perhaps we should send a messenger to talk with her. Voices of agreement sounded, though sparsely. Most of them were lower-ranking barons. Since they all supported Prince Barbaro, they must have been lackeys of one of the nobles' faction members. They didn't seem to notice that anyone with a decent sense of tact wore a bitter expression. You should go, then. The king sounded tired as he gave the order. Sir Momon is an adamantite plate adventurer, though. Don't he do anything to upset him? Yes, Your Majesty, I Nosmarts shall carry out this royal order without fail. All right, then. Do take care to respect Sir Momon, the king repeated, and then dismissed him with a wave of his hand. The noble who had received the order exited the room, brimming with confidence. It seemed like he didn't realize that he would be cast aside the instant any trouble occurred. Marquis Revan sighed. Well, we got off topic. Where were we? Oh, right. I believe we were talking about how much fighting power Aints Ulgaun has. I'd like our common understanding to be that he, on his own, is equivalent to 5,000 soldiers. If there are no objections, he eyed Gazef. No objections. Gazef felt like double that still probably wasn't enough, but he knew it would be a challenge to get anyone who hadn't witnessed his power to believe that. Then can everyone send their troops to the area of Katsi Plain as specified by the Empire? Each noble gave their assent as Revan looked at them in turn. When he faced Marquis Bolero, the man answered loudly. Of course it is no problem, Marquis Revan. I can move my army at once. And Your Majesty, I have one proposal if I may. There is something I would like the prince to do for me. There was only one prince present. All eyes turned to Barbaro. Es said that the caster Aints Ulgaun showed up and saved Khan. If he was just playing at chivalry, that is fine, but it is also possible he was making some sort of strategic move. I think we should send an army and speak with the people there. I'd like the prince to command that endeavor. Marquis, Barbaro glared sharply at Marquis Bolero. Silence. It was the king who spoke. That is not a bad idea. My son, I hereby order you go to Khan and speak with the people there. Gazef desperately worked to keep his eyebrows from moving. He didn't think it would be possible to get information about the caster from Khan at this point. Wasn't it a bad idea to split up their forces, even slightly? If it is an order, then I have no choice but to obey. But please know that it is not what I want to do. Realizing the king had no intention of retracting his command, the prince bowed his head, though he didn't attempt to hide his displeasure. For the army that will go to the village, I'll lend you some of my elite troops. Please also allow me to gather some nobles to accompany Your Highness. I imagine 5,000 is enough. Aha, so you wary of a detached imperial unit. You always so perceptive, Marquis Bolero. Gazef understood Marquis Revan's comments, but he wondered if the Empire would really pull such a stunt after specifying the location of the battle. In a normal war, that would be elementary strategy, but to send out a detachment after promising a definitive battle would simply earn contempt from neighboring countries. The Empire would be hanging itself. I doubt it will require that many soldiers, but it is your proposal, Marquis. I'll leave the numbers up to you. I am grateful, Your Majesty. There is one more thing. Marquis Bolero paused for a moment. He paused less to take a breath than to make sure everyone was listening. Who will lead the army in this war? I have no problem taking command if need be. The atmosphere shifted. That was a disquieting remark. He was asking the king a question, but the content of it was something else entirely. He was putting invisible pressure on the king to hand over command authority. When asked whether King Ramposa III or Marquis Bolarope would be the better commander, most of the nobles would choose Marquis Bolarope. He was also responsible for raising a full fifth of the kingdom's army, 50,000 men. Additionally, he had an elite corps. It was a band of professional soldiers inspired by Gazef's Royal Select. Their combat ability was high. They weren't as strong as Gazef's men, but they could still fight evenly or better against the Empire's knights. What was particularly surprising was how many there were, some 5,000 in total. If they fought the Royal Select, they would probably win a crushing victory with sheer numerical superiority. If the king wasn't present, command would no doubt go to Marquis Bolarope. But the king was present. In this case, Ramposa III commanding was only natural. The members of the nobles faction probably wouldn't accept that readily. Gazef's expression grew stern in response to Marquis Bolarope's pressuring question. The Marquis didn't pay him any mind, though he saw it. To Marquis Bolarope, Gazef was merely a peasant who could handle a sword. He couldn't even stand that anyone who wasn't a noble was attending the meeting. Marquis Revan. Your Majesty, I entrust you with command. March the army safely to the Katsi Plain. I leave the formations and positioning after that up to you. Understood. Marquis Revan accepted the royal order with a bow. Marquis Bolarope had wanted to command the army, but he couldn't complain if it was Marquis Revan. Everyone knew how well Revan excelled. It was hard to criticize him harshly. More importantly, he had an incredible number of connections. Even some of the nobles under Marquis Bolarope were indebted to him. Criticizing him in front of them could make them question Marquis Bolarope's capabilities, so he had no choice but to agree. Marquis Revan, I'll entrust my army to you as well. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you, Marquis Bolarope, I will. The king had managed the situation brilliantly. Gazef couldn't have been more satisfied if he had done it himself. Is there anything else? He waited briefly for any answer, but no one responded. Then begin preparations for war. You'll be departing as early as tomorrow. It will probably take 2 days to reach the battlefield. Make sure to prepare carefully. You are dismissed. Marquis Revan, the rest I leave to you. Understood, Your Majesty. Everyone left the room to make their departure arrangements. The only ones left were the king and Gazef. Ramposa III slowly rolled his neck in a circle. Gazef could even hear it cracking. It had to have been awfully stiff. The look on his face said it must have felt good to stretch. You must be tired, Your Majesty. Indeed I am. Gazef winced. Miniature versions of the kingdom's two rivaling factions had been there moments ago. The king felt fatigue. It had to be quite serious. But there were people who had suffered more than King Ramposa III. I think it's about time. As soon as Ramposa III spoke, there were several knocks at the door. Then it slowly swung open. Someone who had been waiting came inside. The man's face was not much to look at. The best description was probably an overweight bulldog. His hair was thin enough that his head reflected the light. The hairs that were there had turned white. His body was round. There was an overgenerous amount of fat around his abdomen. So much flesh gathered under his chin left onlookers in disbelief. He may not have been much to look at, but there was a gleam of wisdom in his eyes. Ramposa III greeted him with a deeply sympathetic smile. Thanks for coming, Panasole, Your Royal Majesty. The mayor of Rantal gave his master a respectful bow. Then he shifted his gaze. It's been a while, Sir Stronov. Panasole was a noble. He was extremely polite to Gazef, a commoner, and paid him respect. It was precisely because he was that sort of man that he was dispatched to such a key location. Well, if it isn't the mayor, thank you again for your assistance that time, and thank you for helping treat my men's wounds. I had to report back to the king as soon as possible, so I rushed off without offering a proper thank you. My apologies for that. No, please don't trouble yourself. When you were attacked, I understood what a major incident it was, so I didn't find it strange at all, nor could I have. They bowed repeatedly to each other, and the king's cheerful laughter echoed out. Panasole, not going to do that snorting thing this time. Your Majesty, there's no point in putting on that act with people who underestimate me. Or do Your Majesty and Sir Stronov think I am the kind of man who actually does that sort of thing? Sorry. I was only joking. Forgive me, Panasole. No, as your subject I spoke too harshly. Please excuse my rudeness, Your Majesty. Now then, shall we begin? No, the king hesitated before responding. No, there should be one more coming. Shouldn't we wait for him? Oh, then should we get the matter of expenses for the city's provisions out of the way, I can also explain the calculation of national strength a year out, based on materials the Marquis provided. Yes, I'd like to get anything that will give me a headache out of the way first. The contents of Panasolai's report made even Gazef, who knew very little about the internal affairs of the kingdom, frown in worry. The piling costs were enough to make anyone anxious for the future of the country. Scraping together, the great number of necessary provisions had worsened the domestic food situation. Of special concern was the decline in national strength that would occur after demobilizing the conscripts. Panasolai's estimate, though it was probably generous, was enough to give anyone a nervous tick. The king was grimacing. What will we do if the same thing happens next year and the empire attacks? The danger that the kingdom might collapse from internal strife will only grow.